Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving straight into the blueprint for the AB-210 certification exam, and we're zeroing in on one absolutely pivotal area: configuring Dynamics 365 Sales core features for AI. Look, if you're prepping for this cert, you are essentially training to be the architect. Your entire job is to build the flawless foundation required for a truly AI-powered sales system. You can't just plug AI into a messy environment and expect miracles, right? You really have to set the stage first. And that's exactly what we're going to master today. So 15 to 20%, that number right there represents the exact weight of the core features section on your exam. Now, I know it might be super tempting to rush ahead to the flashy Copilot stuff and generative AI topics, but do not underestimate this section. It's a critical make or break area for your overall score. Remember, you need a 700 or greater to pass, and honestly, mastering this core setup is your absolute safest path to locking in those crucial points. As this breakdown perfectly illustrates, before you can even think about optimizing AI, generating predictive insights, or automating deal closing, which makes up the other roughly 80% of the exam, you have to dedicate a solid fifth of your prep to these foundational core features. You simply cannot deploy AI agents or qualify leads if your basic sales environment isn't properly configured right out of the gate. Okay, here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the AB200 exam focus, move into prerequisites and security, cover integrations and data flow, dive into process flows and timelines, and finally, we'll look at managing the product catalog. Let's get into it. Section 1. The AB-210 Exam Focus and Designing AI-Enhanced Solutions. The exam study guide actually provides this really fantastic profile of the ideal candidate. Your core mission? Translate raw business requirements into practical seller workflows. You're the bridge. You're taking exactly what the sales, operations, and IT stakeholders want to achieve, and you're building functional, day-to-day workflows that actually support human agents and Copilot throughout the entire lead-to-cash process. Ultimately, you're the architect laying the foundation. Think of this specific exam section kind of like building a house. If your foundational security, your basic process flows, and your core setups are cracked or misaligned, well, none of the fancy AI appliances are going to work when you finally move them in. You absolutely have to get the groundwork right first. Which brings us to Section 2, Prerequisites and Security. Pouring the concrete slab. For the exam, you must know how to evaluate the prerequisites for deploying sales. But honestly, even more importantly, you need to have a firm, absolute grasp on the sales security model. Secure data access is explicitly called out in the skills measured. Before any AI is turned on, before Copilot starts generating those summaries, you have to ensure that sellers only have access to the exact data they're actually supposed to see. Now, here's something really interesting about this next exam requirement. A simple missing mailbox configuration can completely bottleneck an entire AI deployment. Configuring mailboxes is explicitly listed under the core features section. Why? Well, because if your system isn't successfully syncing emails, your conversational intelligence and Copilot summarization features are entirely starved of the data they need to function. Mailboxes are literally the unsung heroes of a successful AI-first strategy. All right, Section 3, Integrations and Data Flow. Installing the plumbing. This is a massive question for the exam and for real-world deployments too. Where does your sales data actually live? Because AI needs access to all of your collaboration channels to generate proper insights. Your sales team doesn't just work inside Dynamics 365, right? They're working across a whole ecosystem. According to the study guide, you need to know how to configure these core Microsoft 365 functionalities: Teams, SharePoint, Outlook, and OneDrive. You've got to treat these integrations as the essential wiring that connects your seller's daily tools straight to the Dynamics 365 hub. If you want AI to help sellers work more efficiently, you must prove on the exam that you know how to connect the actual places where they're communicating and storing documents. Evaluating the right options for importing and exporting your data is another prime target for scenario-based exam questions. You really need to understand the tools and methods for bringing external records into Dataverse, as well as extracting that data for external analysis or reporting. Knowing exactly when to use which data import or export option is a classic test of your foundational configuration skills. Moving on to Section 4, Process Flows and Timelines, Designing the Floor Plan. Setting up and configuring business process flows is practically mandatory for the exam. And it makes sense because it perfectly mirrors the sequential nature of guiding a seller through the lead-to-cash process. From initial lead generation through qualification, into active opportunity development, and finally closing the deal. You need to know how to build these guided paths because later on, AI-powered guided automation is going to piggyback directly onto the process flows you configure right here. Right alongside those process flows, you must know how to configure the timeline. The timeline is your centralized, chronological record of every single seller interaction. Tracked emails, logged phone calls, noted meetings, and recorded tasks. If this timeline isn't configured correctly to capture all these activities, any future relationship intelligence or AI prediction models will basically be operating blind. And finally, Section 5, Managing the Product Catalog. Let's stock the pantry. It's totally crucial to understand the distinction here. Products are your individual items or services sold to customers. Product families, on the other hand, are groups of related products used for categorization and shared properties. Differentiating between configuring standalone products versus product families is a classic area for tricky exam questions. You really need to know the hierarchy and exactly how properties are inherited. To fully complete the product catalog requirements, you've got to be able to create and manage price lists. And you can't just stop at basic pricing either. The syllabus specifically calls out the intricacies of handling different currencies. For global sales teams, ensuring that opportunities calculate totals properly across multiple currencies is a foundational setup task. You absolutely must master this before you can rely on AI to generate accurate forecasts or predict revenue goals. So your foundation is built. By mastering prerequisites, data flows, process flows, and the product catalog, you will have completely locked down that critical 15 to 20% of the AB-210 exam focused on core features. But this leaves us with a pretty exciting question to ponder. Now that the house is built, how will you actually configure the AI-powered intelligence, Copilot, and sales agents to optimize this new environment? Well, that's where the real magic of Dynamics 365 sales happens, and that is exactly what your strong foundation has prepared you to tackle next. Good luck with your studies.